Okay, so June 6, 1944. The Allies launched this just unbelievably ambitious military operation that completely changes the course of World War II. It was a victory against absolutely staggering odds. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how they pulled it off, looking at the key strategies that made the impossible, well, possible. All right, let's get into it.
Just try to picture this. On one single day, more than 155,000 soldiers, plus thousands of tanks and vehicles, crossed the English Channel, which is notoriously treacherous, to storm a coastline that's been heavily fortified for years. This wasn't just some small attack. It was an overwhelming wave of men and machinery, all converging on 5 beaches in Normandy, France.
And yeah, that really brings us to the big question, right? When you just look at the sheer scale and the insane complexity of it all, it seems almost unbelievable. So how on earth did the Allies manage to breach Hitler's so-called Atlantic Wall and secure that vital foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe? Well, the answer? It's this brilliant combination of strategy, deception, and just overwhelming power.
You know, to really get why this was so amazing, you've got to understand the challenge they were up against. I mean, the Germans had spent years building the Atlantic Wall, this whole network of coastal defenses specifically designed to crush any invasion attempt. The Allies weren't just attacking a beach. They were trying to break into a fortress.
Look, this victory wasn't some magic trick or a single silver bullet. It really came down to 3 huge things: absolutely meticulous planning, incredible industrial might, and mastering 3 critical pillars: a grand deception, a powerful amphibious assault, and flawless Allied coordination.
All right, let's jump into that first pillar, because honestly, it's one of the most incredible parts of this whole story. Before a single soldier even landed in Normandy, the Allies had to win a war of the mind. They had to make the Germans look completely the wrong way.
And the way they did that was with something called Operation Fortitude. This was a massive, incredibly elaborate campaign of misdirection. The whole point? To make Hitler and his generals absolutely convinced the main invasion was going to strike at Pas de Calais, which is the shortest point across the Channel. The goal was to make the real attack on Normandy look like nothing more than a diversion.
And this just shows you the sheer scale of this bluff. They literally invented an entire army from thin air, the 1st U.S. Army Group, or FUSEC. To make it believable, they put the legendary General George Patton in charge and made it look like he had over 1 million troops ready to go. That's a force massively bigger than the actual invasion force heading for Normandy.
So how in the world did they pull this off? Well, think Hollywood-level special effects. I'm talking inflatable tanks and fake planes, broadcasting tons of fake radio chatter about troop movements, and even using double agents to feed a steady diet of convincing but totally false intel right to the German high command. They even figured out how to jam German radar. It was a complete masterpiece of misdirection.
And the craziest part? It worked. It totally worked. Because the Germans were so sure the real attack was still coming at Calais, they held back some of their most powerful reinforcements, like the elite 2nd SS Panzer Division, for 17 critical days after D-Day. That little bit of time was everything. It gave the Allies the window they needed to establish their beachheads and start building up their forces.
Okay, so that's the deception. Now let's talk about pillar number 2, the actual assault. With the Germans busy looking the other way, the Allies unleashed the full, unbelievable force of Operation Neptune. That was the naval part of the invasion.
I mean, the numbers here are just mind-boggling. Think about it, nearly 7,000 vessels, everything from massive warships down to tiny landing craft, all formed this incredible armada that carried the Allied armies across the Channel. It was, and still is, the largest fleet ever assembled.
But even with the Germans looking the other way, the challenges were just huge. The troops were up against the Atlantic Wall's guns, some of the worst weather you can imagine, a storm so bad it almost canceled the whole thing. And then, once they got ashore, this crazy dense hedgerow country called the Bocage, which was an absolute nightmare for advancing troops.
And this is where Allied ingenuity really became a game changer. They rolled out some unbelievable new tech, like these duplex drive tanks that could literally swim ashore. And they developed these ingenious logistical solutions like Pluto, which was a massive undersea pipeline designed to pump fuel directly to France. This kind of technology was absolutely essential for keeping the attack moving forward. Okay, so that brings us to our third and final pillar, the one that really ties it all together: coordination. An unprecedented level of it. This wasn't just a US operation or a British one, no. This was like a perfectly conducted symphony of land, sea, and air forces from multiple nations, all working as one.
And the conductor of that symphony? That was SHAEF, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force.
Led by General Dwight D. Eisenhower, SHAEF's job was to make sure every single piece of this ridiculously complex machine, from the paratroopers dropping behind enemy lines to the warships bombarding the coast, was perfectly, and I mean perfectly, synchronized. And just look at this. This gives you a crystal clear picture of their dominance in one critical area, the sky. On D-Day alone, you've got the Allies flying over 12,000 missions. The Germans, fewer than 400. That is total air supremacy, and it was absolutely vital for protecting the troops on the ground from getting torn apart by the German Air Force.
And we can't even talk about this without mentioning the sheer effort that happened before a single boot hit the sand. This thing called Operation Bolero. It was this massive logistical miracle that moved 1.5 million troops and just an ocean of supplies to Britain, basically turning the entire island into one giant launch pad for the liberation of Europe.
So there you have it. Deception, overwhelming force, and flawless coordination. Those were the keys. But the story of Normandy isn't just some dusty page in a history book. Its legacy contains some really powerful lessons that are still incredibly relevant today.
Yeah, this quote really nails it. What D-Day really teaches us is just how important it is to have clear, shared goals, to integrate every single resource you have available, and, this is the big one, to be adaptable. To be ready to change your plan on the fly when things don't go exactly as you expected.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question, doesn't it? When you look at the huge, complicated, multifaceted problems we're facing in the world today, what can we learn from that unity of purpose, that incredible innovation, and the sheer audacity of Operation Overlord? It's a pretty powerful question to think about.